This is the African Governance Institute for Development, AGID for short. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being consistent, always ready to learn. And today we are going to be having a fantastic conversation on building bridges, collaborating with the diaspora in transforming Africa. I bet you have questions. I'm sure we all have a thinking, a perspective about diaspora, and we're going to be talking a lot about that this evening. So welcome everyone. Once again, it's so good to be here. We're in the month of October. It's Black History Month, and at AGID, we focus mainly on governance issues, leadership, and national development. And in the month of October, we are focusing on national development. And under national development, we're spotlighting the value of diaspora and what diaspora brings to national development. And tonight I will be joined by someone that is very capable to speak about this subject, someone that I met a few years ago and respect highly. And I'm sure when she starts to speak, you will know why I am excited to have our guest this evening. So please let us know where you're joining in from. Just type in the comment box. I see our face. I see the regular faces. Thank you for being here. Daniel, Karis, Opeyemi. I see Gapia, Abraham. I see Gusitobi. Thank you, Peter Baba. It's so good to see you all here. Just let us know where you're joining from, and we will get this conversation going. The way it's going to work, we're going to talk for about 35 to 45 minutes, and then we will start to take your questions. So please, if you have any questions about, look, how are we going to make this diaspora work? In the last few years, a lot of people have left the country. Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, the people are migrating. But the point is, this is Africa offering the world something. Or is that how we see it? Or is it just we're losing brains and it's a brain drain? So these are the type of conversations we're going to be having this evening. And I am really, really looking forward to it. Mabel from New York. It's good to have you. Sadiq, thank you from Nasarawa. Thank you for joining us. It's so good to be back in the month of October, looking at the theme of national development, but really spotlighting the place of the diaspora in transforming different nations in Africa. So once again, thank you for joining, and we are waiting for our guests, who I'm sure will be joining from the back end any minute from now. In the meantime, I definitely have some stats for you. I like my stats, and I want to read you some stats just to let you have an idea of how important diaspora is. In 2022, it was said that nearly $100 billion flowed into Africa. $100.1 billion flowed into Africa in remittances, which is approximately twice the level of overseas development assistance that Africa got. And really, I don't think we need to keep talking about assistance. Africa can really be more and do more. 17 out of 54 African countries are dependent on remittances for at least 4% of their GDP. And that just gives you an idea of how much the diaspora remits money. When that diaspora sends money back, is known as remittances. And this is just to give you an idea of the sort of figures. In 2021, 49 billion was received in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is according to the World Bank Migration and Development Report. So there is a lot to talk about remittances. Should remittances just be for consumption, for paying bills, for helping family back at home? Or should remittances be for a lot more than that, for development, for developing roads and schools and hospitals and the likes? Now, I understand my guest is here, and I will be bringing her up any minute from now so that we can get this conversation going. Thank you, Ayomide Ademola from Lagos. Thank you, John Afolabi, a regular with us at the AGID. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to be bringing up my guest. Oh, yes, she is. Thank you very much. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too,
Ladies
Seyi.
and gentlemen, it is my pleasure. It is my honor to really bring on someone I met. I think it's almost 2 years now. It feels like it's a long time, but you know, it is such a joy to always speak with her. Someone very intelligent, someone that, you know, we just kind of got talking the first day and took it from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Stella of AFFORD, and AFFORD means the African Foundation for Development. She's based in the UK, but I'm sure when you hear her speak, you'll get to know a little bit more about her. And I think it's probably best, Stella, I hope you're there, really to start with. I have your profile in front of me, and it's quite long, but maybe I should just allow you do a you know, an introduction of yourself and tell us what you're up to.
Great. Thank you, Seyi. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay? Because it's dropped a couple of times. I heard everything you said, though. But just checking you can hear me, you can see me, it's all okay.
Yes, there's a bit of a twitch, but I think we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. If it
Okay.
carries on, let me know. I will just change my connection if I need to do that. Okay.
All right.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. Thanks for the invite, Seyi. I'm very excited to be here, and apologies for showing up a little bit later, but as technology will have it, I needed to have Chrome and not Safari, which I normally use. So I had to quickly adjust that. But great to be here. So as Seyi had mentioned, my name is Stella Opoku-Owusu, originally from Ghana, based in the UK. And I have been, well, about myself. So I've been working in the diaspora and development space now for a little over 20 years, I'd say. And it's been a very interesting journey, which I'm hoping I will be able to share with you. But I'm the executive director at AFFORD, which is the African Foundation for Development. The organization itself has been going for about 30 years, and led and pioneered in the way of diaspora and development, policy and practice, and so on. And I've sort of dipped my toes in and out in that journey over the years, from, I like to say, once a young person, no longer a young person. So I've had that sort of journey, if you like, in and out, but now the executive director, and really focusing on, you know, some of the things that, say, I think you were talking about how do we make diaspora contributions much more impactful than they are. And that's a space within which AFFORD comes in, because the diaspora contribute in their own ways, without any government support, without any intervention from anyone. They do what they do. And so for us, it's about that added value. How do you provide structures and programs and formalization around the contribution, so that those contributions go beyond peer-to-peer, goes beyond family, and actually supports, you know, communities. It makes a social impact. So that's the work that I'm involved in on a day-to-day basis, and I'm happy to share a whole lot more with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stella. I think the natural question that should follow is really what inspired you to dedicate 20 years of your career, you know, to building that or bridging the gap between African diaspora and the continent. Because, you know, when you said 20 years in this diaspora development space, I'm like, oh, 20 years, that's some time. So what really inspired you to dedicate your time and energy and your talents and everything, really?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Some of it is probably from a selfish point of view, right? A selfish point of view being that you're based out here in the West, you're not in your country of origin or on the continent of origin, and you want to keep that connection. So in my case, I wanted to maintain the connection. I wanted to feel like I was still living on the continent, but living elsewhere. I didn't want to have to choose geographies, right? I didn't want that hard question of where do you want to live, right? And so I guess through that sort of passion of wanting to be involved in development on the continent, but not wanting to have to choose geography, when I stumbled across a Ford, and I understood much better what the contributions of the diaspora, as you were saying. I mean, we look at the contributions of the diaspora across the continent, not just in sub-Saharan Africa. But if you look at the figures from 2022, this went beyond just over 100 billion US dollars to the entire continent. The figures from last year, 2023, are a little bit short, but they're still the highest that they've been, apart from the 100 billion. So it's still just over 90 billion, right?
Wow.
So for me, looking at those numbers, looking at the fact that the diaspora are doing this without any motivation from government, from anyone else, right? If you just left it, this is essentially what they're doing. And when you then compare those amounts, which have been quite high over the years, to FDI, to ODA, to other income that's going into the continent, the diaspora are undoubtedly the largest stakeholders on the continent because it's higher than all those, than FDI and ODA. Of course, remittances go to family, they go to things that the diaspora choose. So it's not coordinated in the way that you'd like it to be for development purposes. But I think the fact that you look at the size of it, and I'm thinking, okay, so if you can build on this, right? If this is the potential of the diaspora, and if you can harness these resources and build on this, then you're on to a winner, really. So I've always believed that the diaspora are the largest stakeholders based on just one source, by the way, of contribution, right? There's just one source. The finance bit is one source of contribution. And if that is higher than other income that's going into the country, then you've got your added value right there. So that's been, for me, that's been the belief that we can do this. We being the diaspora and the African continent together, Africa and its global diaspora, we can come up with solutions and resources to move our continent forward. And of course, alongside friends and others who want to support us. But we've got the numbers, we've got the finance, and we should be able to do this in very creative ways.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, you raised some very pertinent points there. This giving back is motivated by self. Nobody's pushing anyone to do it, and with the numbers, clearly, major stakeholders in the development of Africa. But every time we have this conversation on diaspora, it's a two-sided coin, because in my experience, at least, I have found that there is a growing mistrust of some sort, or distrust of some sort, in that the continent that maybe should embrace its diaspora more, and maybe that's not how you see it, but it would be good to know. There's this, oh, you think you're better than us, perspective from the African continent, and then there's the other side whereby, and so because of that, even when diaspora wants to come in to do things, those on the continent sometimes are not as receptive as they should be, and the diaspora as well feel people at home are not as responsive to some of the things they want to do. I mean, I when I was in the House of Assembly, I tried to do a lot of work with the diaspora, and we were able to achieve some success. But I find that the diaspora is getting a bit frustrated with not being able to get some things done in Africa, and those in Africa feel, the diaspora feel, they know everything more than us, and so there's this growing trend. Is that your perspective? And you know, how do we start to really resolve this rather than creating barriers? How do we create collaboration?
A great question, Seyi, because at the end of the day, these relationships, it comes down to trust, doesn't it? It comes down to trust at the end of the day. So I've got a number of different angles to this, really. But perhaps one thing that comes to mind, which I'll see if I can share with you, because it's somebody else's sort of response, right? So someone I work very closely with. And often his response is to say that when we have, on the continent, when we have other people who are not diaspora, so foreigners who come in to do business or to do development work, local people seem very happy to work with them, no questions asked, even though we on this side have criticized often the white savior mentality. And so it's always very interesting that the reception, as you said, when it comes to the diaspora, can be quite different. But I guess there's something about familiarity, and there's something about how people see the diaspora as well. But it's always two-way, right? It's a two-way relationship. One of the things that we always stress on this side, or when working with the diaspora, is that we as the diaspora, we're there to add value. We're not there to tell people, this is how you should be doing it, right? Those on the ground understand the challenges. They face it every day, right? And if you wanted a day of articulating what those issues are, you would get a day and more, right? So they understand it. Often, they also know what the solutions are. What is lacking are the resources. Yeah, and resources, not just finance, but also global understanding and resources, right? So, for example, you're working with a business that's trying to develop a solution for climate change, for example, you know, whatever that might be. Now, is there enough of global understanding for them to also understand what the trends are, so that they can see if that business is viable in the next 5 years, right? So these are the sorts of things that the diaspora can bring, but it's about understanding that we are there to add value. We're not there to replace. Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing also is that, and I think within that, that understanding also comes with respect, with a genuine respect for what local people are doing. Yeah, so appreciation, respect, those are absolutely important. And then from the side of the local communities, I think, to be honest with you, I think often a lot of it is down to perception, right? So if we from the diaspora can come at this as we're here to add value, we're here to provide whatever is needed to work alongside you, to be collaborative, then you're on to a starter. There might be a bit of suspicion to start, but it's always about creating something that works, and then people, you know, kind of sit up and begin to understand this. I remember many years back, I did some volunteering work, and so I've had this experience before. I did some volunteering work in Nairobi for 6 months, and I was working in the slums. And I think this is the other thing, because diaspora can also come with a different way of looking at things and engaging, right? And I think, as a lot of people know, Kenya and Nairobi, in a way, has been home to many, many development actors over the years, right? Especially with the outbreak of HIV and AIDS and what have you. You just had an influx. Now, when I went in there to work, this was about 10, 11 years ago, I was working with a local team led by a local woman. So it was a local NGO, very small, and they were working in the slums in Kibera. They had a few other volunteers who were all Westerners and Caucasian, and they were younger. They were probably about 10 years younger than me. They were just fresh out of university. One of them was yet to go to university. But the practice of their arrangement or what was going on was that every lunchtime, these young Caucasian people who were also volunteering were going out to buy lunch for the local staff out of their own pocket. And I thought, you're just taking the mickey here. This is not acceptable. And of course, those young Caucasians couldn't say no because they felt, oh, these people are so much in need. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, they might be in need, but they've got jobs. And also, they are just taking the extra. So I went in there to change that. Can you imagine how unpopular I was? But in the end, we came up with a solution that worked. I understood they didn't have very much. Some of them had children. They didn't want to be spending money on, on lunch in the way that we wanted to. That was fair enough. But we were like, okay, you can do the cooking. We will buy the food. There had to be some sort of collaboration. And every week, and I said, whatever you can contribute, right? Even if it is a shilling, we'll take it. But everyone has to be part of this. I mean, it was a small part of the day, right? But anyway, it was just a story to help you understand how sometimes, you have, but you've got to come at it also from an understanding point of view. So while I understood that they were taking the mick a bit, I could also understand why they were doing that, and you've got to bring some empathy as well to the situation.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Stella. You started speaking about remittances earlier on, and like you said, these funds come back. It's just people wanting to help family, wanting to help those back home. How are we going to channel more of these funds towards development projects? How are we going to get them into long-term investments? I know some governments in Africa are trying to do diaspora bonds and the likes. But in your opinion, how is this going to happen? Because like you said, the numbers are there, it's large. How are we going to get this to happen?
Yes, great question. Always a question. Always a question. How are we going to get remittances into investment? We're not. I think, just to give you the brutal answer. But I'll tell you what the possibilities are. We're not, because think about it. You're living in the US or wherever you are. You're paying your mother's bills. Yeah. That's a remittance that's going in every month. You're not going to stop paying that, are you?
No.
Exactly. If anything, if someone said to you, actually there's a diaspora bond or some investment thing in Nigeria, if you put $100 in a month, you will get X return in 3 to 5 years. And you look at it and go, actually, that's not a bad idea. Then you might divert some of that money that you're using, that you're sending to family. You might then be convinced to divert, and we talk about the 10% rule. Essentially, whatever you create, you're looking at potentially the diaspora diverting about 10% into something where they feel this is going to make quite a significant impact. Therefore, I'm happy to either put in a bit more or divert a little bit of money into this, right? But remittances as a whole is what it is. It's personal, it's peer-to-peer. Essentially, it's going to go, to peers. The other thing to bear in mind also is that the World Bank have said that about 25% thereabouts of remittances go into some sort of investment, and that could be to help a small business, a taxi driver in the family, a housing project, etc., etc. Now, we also know that a lot of money that goes into small businesses informally from the diaspora, we know a lot of them don't really do very much. It doesn't really work. The business fails. You give money to a cousin to get himself a taxi so that he can earn some money. And the next thing he's calling you to say the car has broken down. Can you help? I mean, that's sort of business, right? So the question is, can you develop other products where instead of sending that 25% of my remittance to my cousin to start the taxi business or whatever that might be, maybe there is a center that is helping small businesses. I can put something into it. They can go there. They can get support on how to run their business. Yeah. It's these sorts of programs that we need. But the strength of remittances is that, and you can see that in some countries now, Ghana and the Gambia, I know of. I don't know about Nigeria, but both countries have started to document remittances. So they're tracking remittances as well into the country, and they are documenting it. So the central banks are documenting it as part of their national income. And you know what that means? It means that they can borrow against it. Yeah, it means that they can borrow against. So it increases their borrowing power. But besides that, there's so many other policies that you can develop around this, right? Because if you know how much your diaspora are bringing in, apart from just basically borrowing against it, you can develop all sorts of policies, including bilateral agreements with the West to say, look, we know every year we're getting 4 billion into the country. Would you also lend us 4 billion against that? X, Y, Z. But the challenge we have at the moment also with remittances is that the data is available, but the data is not granular enough to make some of those policies stick. And what I mean by that is that, yes, we know it goes to health, it goes to education, it goes to agriculture, but we don't really understand exactly what and how. Now, if that 25% investment of some kind, if we understood that 2% of that in Nigeria goes to helping small businesses grow, right? If we had that data in terms of granular data, there's a lot more you can do with that. Absolutely. But aside from remittances, so that we're not focusing too much also on that, but I think that's got the potential and that's got a lot of power in terms of using it as a basis to leverage investments. Now, apart from that, the diaspora also have savings. And there is data to suggest that if you take the numbers of first generation Africans globally, which is about 17 million, and this is just first generation. So I'm not talking about second generation, third generation, historical diaspora. So the numbers are huge. But if you just take 17 million Africans, which is roughly the first generation numbers that are also documented, right? Each one of them is saving about $1,900. Now that is about $3.2 billion. Okay. Now, if we had structures, Nigeria had a Euro bond, which, became a sort of diaspora bond. If you had more products like that, you could be leveraging this $3.2 billion, couldn't you? If I've calculated that correctly. But it's a huge resource. And as I said, this is just first generation, right? So there are things like diaspora bonds that others are trialing. There are things like match fund schemes. So you have the Gambia, you have Senegal, you have Morocco, you've got a few countries who have match fund schemes, which means that they will put a certain amount of grants or investment out, like 50%, and they'll say to the diaspora, come in, we'll give you 50%, and you bring in 50%, and we want you to invest in houses, for example, or in job creation. So there's so much that we can do with remittances itself, but also just leveraging that also for investments and with diaspora savings. There's so much more.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. And you have shared quite a bit. So I was just going to actually share my experience. And I believe so much in working with the diaspora. I've been a beneficiary. In 2021, an NGO in Canada, Diaspora, Nigerian Diaspora, came together and supported my organization in building an AstroTurf pitch for young people in a marginalized community. And that was just people, Nigerians all over Canada saying, look, we want to impact the community, and to the point that sometimes when we give it to family or for business, we know it's not really going to work. And like you said, maybe it's better to channel it to organizations or causes that can then help them grow. So that's a useful distinction. And there's actually another program we're running now, again, in my organization, where the diaspora is again taking the lead in trying to bring development to these communities. And jokingly, I guess the mindset is always, because when you're in the diaspora, you're used to giving to causes, and maybe you have more disposable income. There's always a lot more diaspora do in terms of these projects than even money you raise within the continent. At least that's my personal experience. I wanted to ask Stella, so what advice would you give to those in diaspora interested in investing in or supporting African entrepreneurs, just to ensure that their contributions are impactful and sustainable? Just, talking about the taxi driver example you gave, what advice would you give to them? Because I presume there are also some people in the diaspora watching this, and not everybody is on the continent.
Of course, yes. I mean, I think just before I come to your question, though, let me just backpedal a little bit on something that you said about diaspora having disposable income, therefore able to support. Yeah.
Well, I think they just generally believe in causes, and so would probably go out of their way, because I'm sure it's not. I mean, they're working sometimes 2 jobs, 3 jobs,
exactly.
but they just believe I need to do this. And I found in most fundraisings that we've done, you always see a strong diaspora connection. Linking to real development as opposed to even what we raise on the continent.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The motivation is very much around I need to do this, as you said. Yeah, there's a sort of it's that connecting factor, as I was saying. It's like an obligation, right? I need to do this. I can't just live my life here. I need to do this. So there is that. But I also just wanted to highlight that there is also, and probably they are in the larger population, so we also need to be aware of this, diaspora who don't have much of a disposable income. As you said, they're working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. Yeah. In some cases, they might have had to apply 3-4 times, borrowed a lot of money to get to wherever they got to, right? So there's an immediate need for them to pay back. That's number one. And at the same time, they've been trying to make this journey because they're looking for better opportunities, and they have family back home that they want to support, right? So the data in terms of diaspora remittances and contributions also says, or indicates, let me put it that way, that the diaspora with less disposable income will often remit a larger percentage of their disposable income, right? To family. Yeah. Whereas the diaspora with more disposable income or with higher incomes, that's not to say that they are remitting less, but in terms of a proportion, their proportion is smaller, right? So I think it's important to also understand that as well, because often I think this is the other point we were talking about earlier. People have this perception of diaspora. And sometimes it's, I mean, people really go through a lot to send money back home. And that's their main purpose for being here for some of them. Their main purpose for being here is a better opportunity to send money back home. Yeah. And I think that that's important as well. But going back to your question about what advice would I give to people in the diaspora who are looking to, to make more of an impact, to support, I think it's really, I'm in two minds about the advice to give, right? Because I would like to say, see if you can identify programs that you can be a part of, where you can share your skills. Because, of course, if you're doing it through a structured program, then chances are your support will go even further, right? Yeah. So I'm inclined to say that. But there are not that many programs either. Yeah. Because the area of work that we are involved in is not very well funded, right? So we're also looking for ways in which we can do this properly. So that would be my advice, but it's a bit of a catch-22. But I think I would say to those diaspora who are really motivated, because you do have diaspora who are like, it doesn't matter if something does not exist. I will see if I can work with someone. They're quite driven. It's their, I want to say it's their nature, but, perhaps it's their sort of passion or their skill set. You've got other diaspora who will do something if something exists, the structure exists and it's working well, then they will spend a little bit of time, put money into something, share their skills. But if nothing exists, they don't have that same ability, if you like to say, I'm going to go out and, and find something that I can join. But I suppose another way also for the diaspora is that, they are, especially for those who are looking to support, there are lots of diaspora community, hometown groups, associations. There are professional ones as well, especially in the medical field. So if you are really keen to support and you really don't have the time yourself to create something, and fair enough, I don't think everyone should be creating things. I think much better for us all to come together and collaborate. You will be able to find something that you can join, a group. If you are in a location where it's fairly isolated, not very many, African diaspora people, there's so much online now as well, so you can access groups and communities online and see what they're doing and see how you can support them. If, like myself, you went to school on the continent, you've probably got an alumni in West, and even if it means that you join them in an annual event like once a year, then that's what you do, because they often will fundraise and then the funds raised will go back to the school. So I think there are so many ways, really, outside of the structured programs, right? There's so many other informal ways that people have put together for you to be able to join. And if you're still stuck, feel free to come and speak to us at Afford.
Always. It's interesting you said that, Stella, because when you said it's a catch-22 in the sense of there are not that many programs, I bet those in Africa are thinking, no, I'm doing something here. See me, find me. And just thinking back now, I recall that both, the program we had in 2021, it was actually a referral. And someone had seen our work, felt, look, these guys have character, they have integrity, we can recommend them. And so maybe the advice for those back home wanting to get investment is trust. The diaspora are not ready to work 2 jobs and throw money away. every penny must count. And so you must build system structures and really do the work so that, and obviously document so that people can actually say, okay, yes, I'm passionate about healthcare, I'm passionate about education or sports, and then this is an organization we can really work with that is transparent and accountable. So I just thought to drop that, because I know many people will be thinking, what do you mean there are no structure programs? There are many structure programs. We're all here. You need to find us. But
that's a key point right there, you know, and you're absolutely right. On the ground, there are loads of programs, but where does one go to find them? I mean, that is such a significant challenge, even for diaspora entrepreneurs, because we've worked with entrepreneurs who have businesses on the ground. And one of the key challenges is where to go and find information about doing business. You know, even local people struggle. How much more if you're not based on the ground? So I think it's all well and good to say, yes, there's so much information on the ground, but where is it? I'm here. Where is it? Is there a website I can go and find this? Is there a trusted website I can go and find this? Is there a website that perhaps connects us, you know, that I can trust? So there's such a gap, you know, in terms of these areas, and finding that information, unless there are programs from, so when I talk about structured programs from the West, right, like a Fort ABC program that we have, or in Europe between France and Germany, there's a program called Meet Africa, which is mainly in Francophone countries. But unless you know of programs like that in the diaspora, which a lot of people do, then they are really just a few programs, you know, and you may not necessarily get onto them either. And whereas, as you said, on the ground, there are loads.
It's interesting. Yeah, I totally hear you. I mean, when I relocated in 2008, one of the biggest, you know, challenge I immediately saw was lack of information. Like, so how do I know what telecom providers, how do I know how much they charge? How do I know this? How do I know that? And that was me newly on ground, and let alone someone that is not even on ground. Where are they going to find all of this? And I think that's a business opportunity in itself. I wanted to ask, and let me just say this once again, if you're just joining us, this is the African Governance Institute for Development. We're talking about building bridges, collaborating with the diaspora in transforming Africa. We've been speaking to our guest, Stella Opoku-Owusu, who has really been sharing a lot of experiences with us. She's the executive director of AFFORD, which is the African Foundation for Development. The floor is open for questions. So if you do have questions, please put it in the chat box, and we will start to take them. But I wanted to ask Stella, I mean, this is something you've done over the years. Where do you see the biggest untapped potential? What is your greatest hope for the future of Africa's, is it development or progress through diaspora collaboration? Where are we going? What would, I mean, if you had the magic wand, how would you direct things to go, if you like?
If I had a magic wand, now that's a brilliant question. Where would I direct things to go? So our focus is really on decent job creation. That for us is a starting point. I mean, we have a lot of our young people, and not just young people, but well, actually young, because the African Union puts young from 18 to 40 now, I think. So that's probably the majority of the continent, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And, you know, we see people leaving. And sometimes I think there was a piece of research done by, I think it was UNDP a few years ago, which was quite in depth. It followed about 3,000 people who had traveled irregular routes to parts of Europe to understand why. And it was very interesting. For the first time, we actually understood that people who were leaving were not just people who didn't have jobs. Some people had jobs and they left their jobs to travel irregular routes to go. And that's when you begin to understand that it's about a vision, right? Are our leaders providing a vision to young people where you feel like, okay, at the moment I'm probably doing some admin work or some tech work or whatever it is, but in 5 years, I think I can progress to this level. In 10 years, I think I can do X, Y, Z, right? And that vision isn't there. And people don't feel that they are getting anywhere. A lot of people don't feel that they're getting anywhere, right? And so for me, I think there are two things here. You know, when we talk about decent job creation, it's not just about the amount of money that you're paid and how that supports you and your family and all of that. It really is also about, does this country and the economy offer me a vision of life, you know, of living life comfortably for the future and with my children and with my family and so forth? Do I feel that I can progress here, you know? And that for me would be the magic wand. And then, you know, the job creation element, those things are business structures, bringing in skills, bringing in the finance, developing innovative products through Diaspora finance, and so forth. I think those are all things that we've documented so much on. And a lot of that we need government willingness in some cases to make these things happen. We need our governments to also push on these fronts in their own engagements with the wealthier countries. You know, the African Union in 2021, 2022 established the ADFC, the African Diaspora Finance Corporation, which is meant to create an endowment fund for the continent, through which you can also have a trust fund scheme as well, which will go to social projects. And essentially what it is that the idea is to engage the OECD countries and the Gulf countries, and to encourage them to provide resources on the back of remittances. So this is where I was talking earlier about how you can use remittances as a guarantee, right? So for them to provide significant amounts of money, taking into account remittances income, and then from there you can then create an endowment fund, right, which supports investment and small businesses on the continent. And you can also then create, in terms of the income or the returns that come from the endowment fund, you could also create a social trust scheme which supports, you know, social projects. And that is still a work in process, basically. You know, and I think, you know, some of these things, it's about all of us, the diaspora, African governments, the continent coming together to say, right, how do we move this forward together? How do we lobby for this? How do we make this work? You know, and you know, a lot of these ideas, innovative ideas, some of us have tested them at a very, very small scale. You know, we know that it does work. But it's about moving it forward, really. Yeah.
Wow. You know, I did, please, once again, feel free to drop your questions. We'll start taking them any minute from now. I heard something recently where it was said that, you know, it's like the African countries are not talking about vision anymore. You know, nobody's talking about vision. And yet, just like you said from the UNDP report, it's the promise of this better future that makes someone resign a job. So he's not even unemployed, has a job, but leaves that job and is saying, look, I'd rather be illegal or, you know, undocumented migrant over there than, you know, stay where I am. And I guess even that makes it more interesting because every country has its own challenges. So even the countries you're going to have their challenges, but it's the promise, it's the the vision that makes people move, that motivates people to move. And I think African countries are just not talking about that at all. So thank you for sharing that. There's a question here I see from Dari. It says, I feel some in diaspora feel the need to burn bridges with us back home. How do we curry their support? I'm sure you have something to say about this, Stella.
Yeah, I saw that query earlier.
Mhm.
To be honest, I think you've also got to go back to the definition of diaspora, and we go by the African Union's definition, which I'm not going to go through all of it, but there's a part of it that says people of African heritage who maintain their connections with the continent. So, in our opinion, if you're not maintaining the relationship with the continent at all, then by definition you're not really diaspora, right? Because you're not making that contribution, which is okay, right? Some people have left war and are absolutely scathed, and they carry that emotional scar with them for life, and they don't want to have anything to do with that country or that place where they now see as a place that doesn't want them, right? And people should feel free to make their own decisions, really, about where they want to belong, etc., etc. The point is that you have a good number of diaspora who are remitting close to $100 billion a year, right? And those are the ones that you want to work with. So that's really, I mean, because you can't, you don't want to spend time trying to engage diaspora who don't want to engage when you've got so many other diaspora who are engaging and want to do it in a much more impactful way. So it's more important to turn your attention to them.
Well, I don't know why I have the feeling I also understand this question.
Tell me more.
And I think, I mean, just the way I read the question, it just feels like, just like you said, some people feel every time they look back, there's so many demands, from the continent. And at a point, they're like, I'm working 3 jobs, I'm working 4 jobs. You have no clue. I remember when I was younger, I used to write a shopping list to my brother in London, and I used to put Timberland boots and Tommy Hilfiger shirts, and when I got to England, I kind of understood that Seyi must have been having a laugh. You must really have been having a laugh, and so I think part of it may be the person that has now relocated, that has, in Nigeria we say jackpot, that's jackpot, now thinking, you don't even know what I'm going through, and here you are, asking for certain things that may be legitimate, but I just feel, look, I'm not going to get involved with home anymore. So I that was kind of how I read that question.
I see. Yes.
What's going on? And so how do you curry their support?
Yeah, I think I'd probably rephrase the how do you carry their support to how do you support them? How do you support them? I think this is what is often is missing from even the diaspora engagement policies that our governments have. A lot of it is about how do we leverage diaspora resources, which is great, but also how do we support the diaspora from that side, right? How do we open our arms to them? How do we extend invitations to them, make them feel like they've got a first home or a second home? How do we support them? And I would say, just from a peer-to-peer, if you're just doing peer-to-peer, and this comes from personal experience, having someone just call you from the continent using their own credit to say, how are you? That's it. They're not calling me to ask me for money. They're just like, oh, I've been thinking about you. Just wanted to see how you are. It's probably very cold. How is it going, right? That in itself, you have no idea. And it's a 30-second conversation. That in itself makes you feel like, as a diaspora, you feel like, I would like to do something for this person if I can in the future. And I have had this myself. And I've had the exact experience, as you mentioned as well, where you have people, when they call you or message you, it's always about how much. What am I getting this Christmas, right?
When is it coming?
So, exactly. And we do that as human beings, don't we? So we just have to even forget about the diaspora, just as human beings. If you have someone coming to you all the time and asking, you're probably more inclined to pull away from them. Whereas if you have people checking in on you genuinely, you're more likely to move into their space. And it's the same thing if we take this at the support level, at the national level, at the however you want to call it. It's the same thing. And we need more of that. So for example, I know in Ghana, they've been really working hard to provide passports and citizenship to members of the historical diaspora, some of whom have lived in Ghana for many years and have been pushing and asking for this, and some of whom are doing some incredible things there as well, And in some ways, it's like a thank you, in some ways, it's like a welcome home. It's, and you need structures like that kind of like recognize the diaspora at that sort of national level.
I think just listening to you, Stella, we certainly need to change our perspective in Africa, on the continent, to not just we need to get to, we actually have a lot to give. And Africa has given the world so many things. We've given the world music, entertainment, even the diaspora. We call it brain drain.
Afrobeats. You had young people here in the US, in the UK, who are not African, of African diaspora heritage, Caucasian. They're singing and dancing to Afrobeats.
Absolutely.
You know where they're going to go on holiday next? Right?
Of course.
They're headed to the continent.
Of course. And I think we need to change that perspective to not just they give, diaspora gives, continent takes. So actually, continent has a lot to continue to give. Culture, and so much more. But let's continue with the questions. I think I see more questions coming up. I think what role can the African diaspora play in Africa's transformation? How can we effectively engage them? Is that it?
So I think there are two questions from John, right, which are fairly similar. So let me do a very short, what I call a Diaspora 101, if I might. Right. So we conceptualize diaspora contributions into 6 different areas. One is finance, which is, as you know, remittances, but also direct investments and other types of investment that they make. The second one is around skills, right? So diaspora intellectual skills and sharing skills. And by the way, up until just before COVID, I'm not sure what the data is now, the World Bank had indicated that if you put remittances, both formal and informal, as well as skills together, you were probably looking at something like $200 billion US.
Wow.
So absolutely massive a year. And then you also have social, right? So this is about diaspora networks, and how they leverage their networks to support. You have cultural. This is the diaspora as ambassadors for food, for clothes, for music, and so forth, which promotes the country in a different location and means that you sort of increase the market, right, for those products. And then you've also got political as well. So the diaspora lobby, of course, they get involved in politics as well. You have some countries where the majority of the governments, such as in Guinea, a significant number anyway of the government is made up of the diaspora, right? So you've got some countries like that. You've also got, for example, Senegal, which has, I think, about 16 places in parliament for the diaspora. Absolutely. So they've created that, which means that the diaspora can stand to be elected every 4 or 5 years, or however often they elect their local MPs. And then you've got the factor of time. So in terms of the time that the diaspora also give, whether they're skill sharing, whatever it is that they're doing. So those are the 6 ways. So your second question around how we can leverage the skills expertise, think about all these different types of resources, and how one can leverage that. So essentially, some of the things that we've done, we have our job creation program, which is carried by our ABC, which is the Afford Business Center. And we identify diaspora as mentors and coaches. So they support local SMEs virtually. We've had a program many years back. We had a program in Sierra Leone where over a period of about 3 years, we took about 150 diaspora, not all of them at the same time, over a period of 3 years, a few of them on 2-week trips, which were organized for them to go and work with small businesses. So they went in and they worked all together. I think they ended up working with about 800 businesses, MSMEs. So there were some micro and some SMEs, right? So there's so many different ways in which you can tap into diaspora, support in that way. More to your first question around what role can the African diaspora play in Africa's transformation, and how can we effectively engage them? Again, transformation, as I said, from Afford's point of view, it's very much around developing entrepreneurship through the SMEs, because the SMEs create the most jobs as well, and supporting in that journey. Right now, we have diaspora as entrepreneurs themselves, right? So what incentives can we provide in the country to also attract, diaspora to grow their businesses if they have businesses on the ground, or to support with mentorship, with coaching, and so on. We had a program which was focused just on diaspora entrepreneurs a few years back. Nigeria was one of the 4 countries that we were working in. And we provided an incentive. So this is about providing incentives to engage them. We provided an incentive of £30,000, equating 80%. So they had to put in 20% to receive the grant to build up their business. And that's an incentive. And you know what? We asked for 20%. They ended up putting in about 40%. So it was much more. And even in that, we did not even evaluate assets that they brought. So for example, some of them already had property that they used as the office space for the business, right? And they weren't charging the project for it. So they were obviously paying for that themselves. Some of them had land and all sorts. Now, if you were to pull all that together, it is quite, significant, but you've got to provide those incentives to them, for them to, or for us to be able to expand on that support. You need to provide those incentives. And essentially, we talk about 3 or 4 things. One is around adding value. If you want to engage the diaspora, it's about adding value, right? That's number 1. It's about providing also some capacity. Now, this is where I think that question around what do we give the diaspora comes in. There are lots of programs that are badly designed, where it's just about, the diaspora will come in and do X, Y, Z. No, they won't if you're not providing any support. So we always have supports built into our programs, training, a number of things that they're interested in. So they're also receiving something and they're giving as well. I've mentioned incentives already. And then, of course, structured programs essentially is how you want to do it. So those are the 4 key things that we talk about in terms of leveraging diaspora support. That is.
Excellent. I think we have one more question.
The one on the screen, So what is the continent giving back to the diaspora? It's funny, I was just talking about that and I hadn't seen the question. Are we making the continent better than how they left it? Oh, I like that second part of the question. Are we making the continent better than how they left it? That's a good one. Maybe let me tackle the first one first. What's a continent giving back to diaspora? I think this is what I was saying about it is a two-way relationship. And actually, I've spoken a lot, I think, about or from the perspective often of the first generation diaspora. But when you look at second generation, third generation, and beyond, what we're seeing is that a lot of them are very interested in business, in entrepreneurship, and so on. The second thing about that generation or those generations is that they're not wedded to their countries of origin, right, through their parents, but they have a connection with a continent. So if they feel more of a relationship, they might be Senegalese diaspora, they travel to Ghana, they feel more of a connection with Ghana. That's where they connect with, and that's where they'll start to build their relationship. Yeah. And for them, it's very much two-way as well. It's a give and take, and they're very clear about that, right? It's about, I want to do business. I'm here to do business. This is what I'm bringing into the country, and this is what my expectations are in return, right? So it's very much two-way, and that needs to be recognized because, as I was saying, it's the incentives are essentially what you provide. So people feel, okay, the incentives for the diaspora. The annual events which some governments have started to hold, which also recognizes and acknowledges the diaspora. I think a bit like award programs, if you can put those in, that's great, because it encourages people to give back, doesn't it? Because they feel that they will be acknowledged in some way. So there's so many different ways to do this. That second part, are we making the content better than how they left it? I mean, I would challenge that question a little bit, really. I mean, I think we are where we are, aren't we? Whether they left or they didn't leave. It's much more about how do we work together to make it better? Yeah. And yes, in some ways, you could say that unfortunately, in some countries, it's probably worse than it was 10 years ago, but that's not necessarily the fault of the people there or the fault of the people who've left, not necessarily, right? We've got leadership challenges. We have all sorts going on, right? But it's much more about how do we work, collaboratively. And yes, I mean, you will find a lot of diaspora, we like to complain. We get back on the ground and, oh, it's too hot, first thing. Second thing, oh, the taxis, there's always thing. Yeah, make so much noise, we make so much noise. But I think it's much more about, let's collaborate as peers, right, with respect for each other. Understanding what each one can bring to the table, and that everyone can bring something to the table, and I think that's the main thing.
Wow. Thank you. Some real profound insights you have shared this evening with us. Stella, I'm really grateful. I've been writing, my head's been down, just especially in the last few minutes, you've been dropping a lot of points, and thank you. Really, on behalf of everyone that has been on this call, really want to say thank you. We did promise we won't go longer than 75 minutes, and we're about getting into that. So on behalf of the African Governance Institute for Development, we just really want to thank you for coming online, for sharing insights, sharing your experiences. We have learned a lot, and certainly we will still be in touch. I just really want to draw one of the last points you said, and to me, it's something that really sticks with me. It's that nation building. It's about all of us. Diaspora, to a large extent, is still part of us, and it's not them versus us. It's us in different places still trying to grow the continent, and I think we must continue to have that collaboration mindset whereby they give and we give, and it's a two-way street. And I think that's certainly something we have taken on this evening. So thank you very much, Stella, once again. To everyone that has come online, thank you. Please take part of the survey so we can serve you better. And follow us on our social media platforms, on X, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube, especially if you want to watch a replay of this session. So thank you, everyone, really for joining. Stella, I am grateful on behalf of the team, where we really want to say thank you for sharing your time with us this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Seyi, for the invitation. It was brilliant.
Then.
Good to chat.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good evening.
All right. So everyone, thank you once again for being here. Till we meet again in 2 weeks, we will be having 2 professors from the United States that will also be talking to us in regards to, national development. But again, these are professors from the United States, and one of them, is from not been to the continent, but is very much interested in the diaspora. So we'll have different views next week. So on behalf of the team, once again, we want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of AGID webinar this evening. Please fill the survey so we can continue to serve you better. On behalf of the entire team, thank you for being here and have a good evening.